Hey guys, I had a couple requests in the last video to make a follow-up on the Massey Ferguson Backhoe. Guys wanted to see how to repack these bucket tilt cylinders for the front loader. So I'm going to try to make a video. It may not be the most polished, well put together video that I've ever done. I'm under the gun. He wants it back ASAP. Springtime's coming and it's already been here a week longer than I thought it would be. So yeah, we'll make a video, but we've got to kind of plow through it quickly. Now before we get too carried away, let's talk about this rotary swing cylinder that we rebuilt in the last video. I got a lot of comments, mostly good, some not so good. Anyway, a lot of people were asking or commenting about breaking the bolts loose before removing the cylinder from the machine. Why didn't I do that? It's because you can't. You can only access two on either side, depending on where the boom is sitting. So one of the small 1/2-inch bolts and then two of these big guys. So I should have anticipated there'd be a lot of comments about the sloppy splines. Yeah, it's a problem. They're not going to last forever. At some point he's going to be swinging this thing and it's just going to keep right on going. The problem is there's no real easy way to fix this. These are tapered internal splines and they're not of any kind of normal dimension that I can find. So it's not something you would just take to a machine shop and have them, fab up a new flange. The only way to really replicate that shape that I can think of is with a wire EDM. You'd have to fabricate the plate, figure out the dimensions, and then somehow cut that shape out on an EDM. And that's very expensive. I would think $1,500, maybe $2,000 would get that done. Probably the only practical repair for this would be some kind of a high compression strength epoxy. There's several of them out there. So what we'd have to do is take the plate off probably and cut a groove on the inside, and then we'd put a port here and inject the epoxy and let that set up. I don't know how long that would last, but it would certainly be, well, it's cheap enough and easy enough that we could probably try that. We can't weld it. There's no way to weld onto that shaft without destroying the seals in the bottom of this swing cylinder. I don't think we can pin it. The shaft that runs through that swing motor it's hard as a coffin nail, so you'd never get that done. I don't know, you might be able to split this collar and pinch it. I had a suggestion for that. That would probably help. But that's only going to tighten up the socket. It's not going to tighten up the splines. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll deal with that when the time comes. Alright, I'm still waiting on some parts for the cylinders, so let's deal with another one of the sort of moderate leaks, which is right here. See a spot there and a spot there. They're both coming out of this, or coming down from this square section, which is actually part of the tank, the reservoir that holds the hydraulic fluid. Well, this is the other side of that tube. So that, and then this vertical section here, are part of the loader frame, but they're also the hydraulic reservoir, the tank that holds the hydraulic fluid. That's pretty common for loaders, at least from this vintage. And it's only on the right hand side. So there's actually oil up to about this level right here. And you see this, looks like a filter sticking out of here. That's a suction side filter. So that filters the oil before it goes up to the pump. The pump's actually on the front of the engine. Well, I thought we were going to find a pinhole. Come on, really? Oh! This is not helping my plow through it quickly strategy. Stay. Stay. All right, I thought we were going to find a pinhole on the bottom of that box section, the bottom of the reservoir. But somebody's already been there and welded that up, so I don't think that's the problem. I think it's leaking right there. There's a pipe thread connection there. So we need to try to fix that. The problem is the oil level is actually above that fitting. So if we crack that loose, we're going to have a great big Exxon Valdez style oil slick around here. So we better go ahead and drain at least some of the oil out. Luckily there's a drain plug right here if it comes out. Yeah, that'll work. I scrounged up the rarest item in the shop, a clean 5-gallon bucket. Now I'm pretty confident this holds more than 5 gallons, so we'll just take 5 out and see how far that gets us. I actually have room to turn that stupid wrench. Jeepers. Things are slow in your shop. Just get out of camera. Try to make a video. Had the tire guy here. Getting some tires, and then I had a customer come pick up a tractor. Turned into a madhouse. Anyway, cleaned up the pipe, the little nipple here, put some new Teflon pipe dope on it. Tighten that up. I don't know why, but there's this myth floating around YouTube that pipe dope is not, it doesn't seal the threads, that it's a lubricant. It allows you to tighten the threads tighter. And that might be part of it, but it is 100% a sealant. Well, it's more of a packing. So the problem with pipe threads is that they have a built-in path for a leak, which is the thread itself, and the pipe dope helps to mitigate that. If you don't believe me, just put some extreme pressure grease or some other like graphite lube on your pipe threads and tighten them up and see how long she goes without leaking. I've even had people suggest on my channel that you can't use Teflon tape or pipe dope with hydraulics because it gets into the oil and contaminates the pump or ruins the pump or something. I don't know what kind of pipe threads they're dealing with, but the junk I work on, if you don't put pipe dope on them, you're gonna have a leak. Oh, I did take that big U-bolt off too, so I could actually get onto this thing with a proper size wrench. Alright, you guys are in my way. Alright, that's done. Sorry, there's no room in here for me and you and a bunch of lights and a bunch of big tools. Just wasn't going to work out. Anyway, that should be fine. There's no pressure here. This is a return line. It's just leaking because the oil level is actually above this fitting. So we'll see. These, whatever that's called, BSP swivel fittings, they're not the greatest, but I think it'll work. Well, the fittings are fine, but the problem is the pipe nipples. They're all junk. Anyway, let's move on. Well, next we have to work on this left side stabilizer or outrigger or whatever you want to call it. It won't stay up, but the problem's not in the cylinder. I actually picked the back end of the tractor up with this stabilizer and it held the back end up for over 24 hours, so that thing's fine. The problem is this hose. You can see it's in pretty sad shape and it just pours oil out. So I think what was happening is it was just leaking so much oil out that it wouldn't hold the thing up. This one over here is really not in too bad a shape, so we'll probably let that one go. And it's got this BSP swivel fitting. I don't know if we're going to need that. Might just take that out. So these BSP swivel fittings are supposed to fit into a seat like this that's cut into the end of the fitting. They're not really designed to work on just a generic pipe nipple like that big one that we worked on. So I feel like that's probably why it's leaking. Anyway. So I'll see if I can get a hose made with the O-ring fitting on this end and the regular JIC on the other end. There we go. Brand new hose. My local auto parts store makes hoses. Done. I think we have all the parts we need, so we can finally start rebuilding the cylinders. Lots of ways to do it. Not saying this is the right way or the best way or even a good way, but it's how I do it. I don't really like rebuilding cylinders. I definitely do not go out of my way to find this kind of work. I do my own, and I'll do them for certain people, but it's not something that I like doing, so I try to avoid it. Anyway, what I do usually is just leave the cylinder mounted to whatever it's attached to, because they're kind of awkward and hard to handle once you get them off the machine. So when possible, I just leave them where they are. I've got the pin out of this end. We're going to take the hoses loose and get the oil out of it, and then we'll start tearing it apart. Okay. What a freaking mess. Okie doke. Well, these have a nut on the outside. Shouldn't be tight. Takes a spanner wrench like this, or hook spanner we call it. If you don't have one, just use a pipe wrench like everybody else. Well, here's a helpful tip for any aspiring YouTubers. If you want to record what you're doing, you have to push the record button. Anyway, the threaded part here has to get pushed in. So I've just been tapping it in with the hammer, but it's at a stopping point. It won't go any further. I don't know why. Come on. What's your problem here? Alright guys, I quit. Apparently I forgot to record that part too. What we were after was a snap ring. It sits in this groove right here. A couple of screwdrivers, pop it out. No big deal. Now we got to scrape the crust out of here so we can get the whole gland out this way. Hey, it actually hit the bucket. Oh. We got to pull the piston off and then pop the gland out. This is a very simple hydraulic cylinder. So it has a V-pack here at this end, and then inside the gland there's a spring-loaded V-pack. Pop this guy off real quick. So inside this V-pack, there's a male and then stacks of these V-shaped seals. Like so. Then at the bottom there's a female adapter. So these seals actually look like they're in pretty good shape, and these were installed correctly. So these V-pack seals really only hold pressure in one direction, and that's essentially the side that pushes towards the cup. So in this configuration, the cylinder really only holds pressure, solidly holds pressure on this side of the piston seal. On the other side, it's going to have a harder time. Now the other cylinder I took apart, it was put together backwards, like this. And you kind of have to make a choice, but with a loader bucket, all your force is going to be trying to hold the bucket up when you have a full bucket full of dirt. So you want the seals to be installed in this configuration. So probably this cylinder was okay and did not need to be rebuilt, although it's a little scuffed right there. Now I haven't touched this gland. You see the spiral lock ring? It's just about to pop out. So I don't know what caused that to happen. if they didn't get it installed right or what. Both these cylinders have been rebuilt before, probably several times. So, anyway, get her off there, get her apart. So inside here there's a spiral lock ring and then a washer and a big spring. So we got to be a little bit careful because there's some, there we go, spring tension under there. And pop that guy out. And then inside here should be another V-pack. There we go. So the gland is a little more straightforward because it only has to ever hold pressure in one direction. But these seals look like they're in pretty good shape too. Now on the outside of the gland there's a seal, or an O-ring and a backup ring. Pull that off. Which we've got new ones. So don't worry. And then inside of the piston, there's an O-ring and 2 backup rings. There we go. So the purpose of the backup ring is just to cushion the O-ring. You know, it gives it a little bit of a buffer instead of hitting against the hard steel. You typically don't see backup rings in static applications. So like in that hose fitting that we installed that has an O-ring, you don't need a backup ring there. Where you find it is where things are moving. And in the gland end, you only need 1 backup ring because there's only force pushing against that in one direction. In the piston, it's got forces on both sides, so you need 2 backup rings. The other big problem is this rod is bent. Let's see if I can show you guys. Right about there. So, yeah, we'll straighten it. I took a lot of grief the last time I did this. Everybody said I should have replaced it or made a new one. Yeah, I don't know. I've straightened a lot of cylinder rods. I've seen my dad do it countless times. It's pretty low risk. As long as you don't break it, I don't really see the harm. Especially for these bucket cylinders because they're only in tension. There's really no compression force on this cylinder rod. So, yeah. Looks pretty good. It's a tiny bit low here in the middle, maybe 5/1000ths. But we're not going to try to correct that. If you flip it over and try to press it back, it'll quickly get out of hand. May turn it 90 degrees and try to get a little bit of that side bend out of it. That'll work. Let's quit while we're ahead. Yeah, I've got to go on a rant about parts. I don't know what anybody else's experience with AGCO is, but mine is pure frustration. I gave them the serial number of the loader and the part number of the cylinder, and they sent me these seal kits, which have poly packs and backup rings and all kinds of stuff that obviously does not fit these cylinders. Then somehow they did some digging and found some other parts breakdown, and they were able to get me these 2 V-pack seals and all of these O-rings and backup rings and these wiper seals. Could not get these 2 V-packs. They're obsolete. So what I had to do is go to Baum Hydraulics and buy a standard V-pack seal, but the height is different. The pack height. These V-packs are also the wrong height, but it doesn't matter because they're spring loaded. Anyway, I mean, I guess on the one hand I'm thankful that we can even get any parts at all from the dealership, but I hate when these big companies like AGCO gobble up all these little companies. and think they're going to make a fortune selling parts, but then they don't want to actually do any work or have any actual parts. Just, anyway, let's start putting it together. And these parts really weren't any more expensive from the dealership than they were, you know, from an aftermarket source like Baum. So like I said, the stack height is different. Well, these V-packs have to be compressed a little bit in order to actually seal. So, yeah, this is an old school way of doing it. In the old days, like my dad had an International TD9 with a Huff loader. It actually had, he was telling me it actually had adjustable packing on the end where you could tighten the bolts and tighten up the V-pack seals. Squeak a little more life out of them. There we go. I have no idea what caused that seal to pop out like, or that spiral lock ring to pop out like that. Seems kind of odd. Anyway, that'll work. There we go. So the backup ring always goes on the away from the pressure. So it's pressure, then O-ring, then backup ring. So this is the outside of the gland. And it has this regular single lip seal as a wiper seal. And when I took them apart, one was installed this way and the other was installed this way. So I guess it's dealer's choice. I mean, its only purpose is to scrape the dirt off before the cylinder goes in, so I'm thinking we're going to put it in this way. Should work better. There's no spring or anything to fall out, so it doesn't really matter. That's done. Because the new packings are substantially shorter. I don't know how much shorter, but somewhat shorter. Anyway. What I tried to do was just mix and match the top adapter from the old pack to the new pack, and that worked fine on the left side, but it didn't work on the right side because these two rings are slightly different thicknesses. Anyway, we have to try to tighten that up. These V-packs have to be really tight in order to actually work. So first I was thinking about using some shims. I even made some shims up here. Stick them on here in order to take up that gap, but I finally came to my senses, and here's the sheet that I got from Baum. It gives me a dimension 1.156. So I just took the pistons and chucked them up in the engine lathe and faced about 100 thousandths off the end of each one. And now we'll have the right amount of compression on our V-pack. I think that's going to work. Torque that to factory spec. And now we got to try and see if we can shove it into the cylinder bore. If it won't fit, if this packing's too tight, then we'll have to put a shim underneath of that piston. But I think it's going to work. think we're about done. This is my test setup. Just blocked off the line. Alright folks, that's going to do it for the Massey Ferguson Backhoe. Hopefully the wind's not blowing this out too bad. The bucket tilt cylinders are working fine. They hold pressure, no external leaks. Pretty happy with that. Unfortunately, it didn't completely solve the bucket settling issue. It still settles down pretty quickly. And that's because of a leak in the control valve. Now what we did with the cylinder still had to be done. That one had a bent rod and the seals were messed up, probably from the rod being bent. This one, the seals were in pretty good shape, but it had that spiral lock ring that was just about to back itself out. So definitely needed to be done. It's just too bad that it didn't totally solve the issue. So the control valves here, it's made by Cessna, same as that swing cylinder. And I think I said in the last video that you could test for that if the bucket didn't hold pressure in both directions and the problem was probably in the cylinders. That's not necessarily true. It depends on how the valve's set up. So anyway, there's no way to really fix that. I can't get any parts for it, so we would have to just replace that with a new loader control valve. Yeah, the swing cylinder is nice and dry. And we managed to seal up, well, you can't see it of course. We managed to seal up that fitting on the return line to the tank. And the left side stabilizer is staying up just fine. A little bit of oil on the ground, that's just running off from where we spilled it, changing that hose. The bucket curl cylinder on the backhoe, it leaks pretty bad from the gland seal. See it dripping out on the ground there. And then it's got plenty of other problems. It really doesn't want to start. I think the batteries are shot. And then yesterday when I was running it, it just started pouring fuel out. It's got a little CAV rotary injection pump, and it was just pouring fuel out everywhere. There's a couple of screws here that hold this top cap on. I had to tighten those up. So I think I got it sealed up a little bit better. But yeah, there's definitely, I mean, where do you stop? Look at some of these power steering hoses. And I noticed the tires coming apart on the front here. Yeah, right there. So anyway, it's good enough for now. This guy is just a homeowner. You know, he's not using this thing to make money or run a business or anything like that. So yeah, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.
Hi everybody.
She doesn't want to be on camera.
And every time I say that, you put me on camera.
The people love you.
Except that one person.
They love you so much more than they love me.
I might be a little prettier than you.
She's so modest to people.
So honest. So honest.
Alright. That's your done.
I had him take him off of mouse duty.
Okay, say goodbye.